This is a good one. All right. 1 to 10 scale, Wilson. Super Bowl storylines. How does it rate? Sean McVay versus his protege, Zac Taylor, who was an assistant wide receivers coach in 2017 and the QB coach in 2018.
I'm going to give that a big fat 3.
What?
Here's why. This isn't Belichick versus Parcells or Mangini versus Belichick or Patricia versus Belichick. Something that has some teeth to it. These are two really nice guys. There's not one. I don't think there's anyone more soft-spoken than Zac Taylor. I mean, the only time you get angry with him is because he runs the ball too much on first down, but not because he's done or said something that seems, like a Rex Ryan type stuff where he's getting the other fan base fired up, or you just hate him because he's so good that he keeps beating your team because they've only had success till this year. He's very unassuming. Sean McVay is much the same way. Sean McVay only has good things to say about his former coaches. So it's not, in terms of Hollywood, it's not the script that you would want in terms of Belichick versus Rex Ryan, for example. That's something that you can get behind and hate. But I think, it's almost like a feel-good story.
I'm giving it a 7. I mean, first of all, any storyline involving Sean McVay, I have to give.
Where did he go to college?
Miami of Ohio.
Oh.
Fun fact, Miami of Ohio. But look, the last time the Rams were in the Super Bowl, that was Zac Taylor's final season on their coaching staff. And as soon as they lost that Super Bowl, boom, he was gone to Cincinnati. And look, this came close to not happening. If Zac Taylor had been the coach of almost any other team in the NFL, he probably gets fired after going 6-25-1.
Hey, by the way, I heard an interesting comment from Jim Trotter of NFL Media. He was on Chris Long's Greenlight podcast last week talking about the Brian Flores stuff. And he said that he had somebody with Cincinnati tell him that they knew when they hired Zac Taylor, he wasn't ready for the job, but they thought it would take him 2 or 3 years to figure it out, which I guess is kind of normal for most coaches, but they didn't want to run the risk of other teams finding out about Zac Taylor and getting in a bidding war. So they were willing to bring him on and let him suck for a couple of years. And then they happen to land him Joe Burrow. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, the Bengals don't dump their coaches because they don't want to pay somebody who's not working for them. I mean, that's half the reason he was not going to get fired.
Notoriously the cheapest franchise in professional football.
That is
They weren't going to fire Zac Taylor and then bring him back like the Texans might have done with David Culley.
That would be a classic Texans move. And I like the chess match of the fact that Zac Taylor is going to know Sean McVay's offense so intimately and also vice versa. And so that plays into what we're going to see in the Super Bowl. And so I like the idea of having a former coach going up against his old boss, especially when it is the two youngest coaches to ever face against each other in Super Bowl history.
I'll give it a 4.5. I think it's
there. We go. Thank you.
I don't think it's like
it's not sexy.
Yeah, I mean,
I give your score a 4.5.
Well, I give your score a 0.
There you go.
That's
it all
Dunk, but God, the problem is you sit up here and like it's a good matchup. I'm just curious how much. Like what I think it's a major mismatch for Sean McVay too. Is the problem? Like,
here's the thing. Remember in the Super Bowl a few years ago when it was Belichick versus McVay?
Yeah.
That was a matchup you wanted to talk about. And the whole thing was Sean McVay seemed awestruck after the game because he was
before the game
because he was after the game. We were talking about it when they didn't play well because he had so much respect for Belichick. They're contemporaries. They're the same age. And again, they're pretty vanilla. They're not sort of making waves.
Yeah. And speaking of that, by the way, the next one, when we up here on the set, like doing the podcast, it's easy to sort of get out. We're not like in casual pod where you feel like you're doing like a little like segment of TV, and we're kind of in a hurry because of some timing issues. But this one we're going to skip over it for timing purposes. But this one made me remember that we were doing a podcast. Sean McVay revenge game for crapping his pants in Super Bowl. So when I realized I was going to have to say crapping his pants, it changed how I felt about the current setup. We are in fact doing a podcast.